they're going to be sitting. Yeah, so we don't. Good afternoon. So, thank you all for being here today. My name's Dave Owen, and I'm a professor here and also the Associate Dean for Research. And I'd like to thank you all for coming to the first ever Jackie Speier lecture on women in the law and the rights of women under the law. This lecture series is possible because of a generous donation from Jackie Speier, who is one of our speakers today. So both of our speakers today are political stars and powerhouses. Congresswoman Jackie Speier graduated from this institution in 1976 and then worked as a legislative aide before running for Congress. She lost her first race, and she did not lose again. She began on the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, where she was the youngest person ever elected to the board, and then became the chairwoman. She then served multiple terms in both chambers of the state legislature, and then multiple additional terms in Congress. There, she focused on a variety of issues, including national security, environmental protection, and, most important to today's topic, empowerment and protection of women. She retired from Congress in 2022, though not from politics. She recently ran for and was re-elected to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, where her political career began. Barbara Boxer's career has some parallels, though sadly she did not get a chance to graduate from this institution. After graduating from college, she worked as a stockbroker, a journalist, and a legislative aide before running for the Marin County Board of Supervisors, and she became the board's first ever female member, or female president, excuse me. She was elected to the House of Representatives in 1982 and the Senate in 1992 in what then was known as the Year of the Woman. In 2016, she declined to seek re-election, opening up a seat for a successful run by another famous graduate of this institution. Like Congresswoman Speier, Senator Boxer has worked on a wide range of issues: and environmental protection, opposition to war, health care, LGBTQ rights, and most importantly for today, reproductive rights and women's empowerment were particularly important to her. So the talk today is going to be a conversation between Senator Boxer and Congresswoman Speier. At some point, we will transition to audience questions using the questions submitted through the online form. So if you're called to ask a question, and you know who you are, I've contacted you in advance, please plan to come on up to the microphone and ask your questions. Again, thank you all for coming, and please join me in giving a warm welcome to Congresswoman Jackie Speier and Senator Barbara Boxer.
Thank you. It is so exciting for me to be back on the campus at which I went to law school. It looks very different, however, and I'm thrilled that you're all here, and I'm also thrilled to be kicking off this lecture series that we will have annually to talk about issues regarding women's rights and discrimination. And our very first speaker is none other than Senator Barbara Boxer. And we are so fortunate to have the senator here with us because she now resides mostly in another part of the state, but she's just returned from the convention. And so I'm sure she'll have words of wisdom about that. But I want to start off, first of all, saying welcome to you, Senator Boxer. Thank you for being
Jackie.
here.
Thank you.
She wrote the book called The Art of Tough. And I highly recommend it to all of you because not only is it very instructive, it's also very funny. So one of the first things she talks about is how in politics you really got to develop a tough skin, right? I call it alligator skin. You gotta brush it with Brillo. But she had some very painful, well, I don't know if they were painful for you, they were painful for me to listen to, but she was really criticized, and by two fairly famous provocateurs, I'd say, Ann Coulter and Mike Savage. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I wear that like a badge of courage, right? When, people like that who are so mean go after you. So yeah, in the course of when I wrote the book, I decided what was the elephant in the room, all these people that said these horrible things about me. So I just put them in the very beginning of the book. I just said, here's what people have said about me. Take a look at it. Yeah, Ann Coulter said, and you see her now even criticizing Gus Walls, the son of Tim, who has some learning disabilities. So she said, oh, the Democratic Party loves disabled people. Look at Barbara Boxer. She's learning disabled. That was sweet. Yeah, that was really sweet. And then the other one, Savage, who was savage, said, why is Barbara Boxer in the Senate? She should be on the Queen's Turnpike selling brassieres. What? Right. Who can even think these insults up? But again, what Jackie and I learned is you're known, and this is true of you too, you're known by your friendships, and you're known by the people who, try to put you down. And the reason they try to put you down is to shut you up. And anyone who knows me or Jackie, that's impossible. We're just not going to fall for it.
So you had your 10 commandments of sorts.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about anyone in particular, or
You
should I
have
just...
to read them because I can't remember all.
So don't be neutral.
Don't be neutral. Okay.
Never compromise. Don't be afraid to stand up. Be aware of, I can't read my, forgive, fight against racism, be strong on issues even if you are wrong, sing, go for your dreams, and never settle for less than love.
Oh, I like that. Who wrote that? I love that last one. Don't settle for less than love and joy. I want to talk about the one about compromise, because when I wrote that, what I meant was don't compromise your principles ever. But that doesn't mean you don't compromise in life or in work like I had. I'll give you a great example, Jackie. When I got to the United States Senate, I ran as a strong environmentalist, as Jackie did, and the Sierra Club came to me and said, we really want to put a lot of acres into wilderness. And when you have a wilderness designation, just so you know, it just preserves it as God gave it to us. You just can't even build a road. Everything is perfect. And it's very important to preserve that. So they came to me with 2 million acres of wilderness in the state of California. And I wrote my bill and I dropped it in the hopper to get it done. And I worked with the members of the House. As Jackie will tell you, the wilderness areas were all over the state, from north to south, east to west. So you had to get the member of Congress to agree, the House member. And there were a few, like half a dozen, who just told me in nice language, bye-bye, not interested. So I came to the realization I could only get 1 million acres. And I decided I was going to move forward. And I had a meeting with some of the more, let's just say, activist environmentalists, and they said, how dare you do that? You have to hold out for the 2 million. And, you can't just do 1 million. There's no reason. And I said, look, if these people are going to stand in the way, we get nothing. So I did compromise, and I did get 1 million acres. But I don't think in any way I compromised my ideals. So that's why I would put a question mark on that. I think the other one is don't be afraid or to stand up. I can't...
The 2-cent lollipop.
What?
Do you remember the 2-cent lollipop?
Yes, I do. Oh my God, what a story. She's taking me back to when I was a child. In that book, that's what I do, yes. So you have to stand up, even if it's hard to do it. And it is hard. And so this is a story. I was a kid in grammar school in sort of a tough section of Brooklyn, New York. And I had a really good friend named Sheila who lived above me in the apartment house. Whenever they had a fight, we would take the broomstick and say, "Be quiet up there." I mean, that's the kind of world I grew up in. So Sheila was very lovely. I'm a little person. She was tall and blonde. She had everything. And we stopped off at the local, what they call a candy store. Do you guys know what I mean when I say a candy store? It's really, you wouldn't know it. In those years, it was a place you would go to, there'd be a soda fountain, and they would sell candy, you know, like Raisinets and Chunkies and different things like that. So my friend Sheila grabbed two 2-cent, like little, what do they call them? Like taffy pops. I don't, they still probably make them. They're like taffy pops on a stick. And I didn't see her do it. And we get out of the store and she throws this thing at me and she said, "I stole these." 2 cents. And I just remembered that, you know, what I had been taught as a kid. No, never, ever, ever, ever take anything. Don't even take a loan. If you take a loan for 25 cents, pay it back immediately. And it was ingrained in me. And I said, "Sheila, I can't believe, you know, you did this." And, well, what's the difference? They don't care. It's nothing. It's anyway, I had to go tell my mother. Oh, my God. And then my mother made me fess up. And it was Sheila and I, that was the end. I guess it was never a beautiful friendship, but you get the issue as a kid. And so we all learn these things as children. And when you're, you know, parents or you're parenting somebody's kid, it's important to make the point that even if it doesn't look like it's a crime, it's a terrible thing, if everybody did that, what would happen to that store? So, yeah, you have to be clear. I will take it more to a modern day story. Flash forward, Mitch McConnell. Know him? Love him? No. So when I got to the Senate, Jackie will remember this. There was a senator named Bob Packwood from Oregon, and it came to our attention that he had sexually harassed at least 22 women, including waitresses and people, all, you know, lobbyists and, you know, his staffers and people all over, 22. And I had just come into the Senate, having marched up the steps of the Capitol to protest the Anita Hill situation with Clarence Thomas. I wish we had won that one. Now we're stuck with him. So the bottom line is I decide we got to get rid of Packwood. And I was not on the ethics committee, but my friend Barbara Mikulski was. So she would whisper in my ear and say, "I can't," she'd go, she was the only person shorter than I was. And we could look each other in the eye. It was really fun. And she'd say, "Barbara, you need to take this issue. I can't talk about it. It's horrible. He's horrible. We got to get rid of him." So I did. What did I do? I just said, we need public hearings. That's all I said. I'm not saying he's guilty, he's not guilty. We need public hearings. And Mitch McConnell had a hissy fit. And he said, because he was afraid he would lose that seat, which he did eventually to Ron Wyden. And I just kept on going. And one day he came up to me. This isn't a secret, it's in my book. He remembers it quite differently. He comes up to me on the well of the Senate floor and he says, "You have to stop demanding public hearings and mind your own business." I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." He said, "Well, then I'm going to go after Ted Kennedy. I'm going to start more hearings into Chappaquiddick," which had happened like 30 years before. "And I'm going after Tom Daschle's wife because she's a lobbyist for the airlines." I said,
how about the lobbyists for the Chief Justice?
yeah. bottom line is, yeah, he says this to me, and I say, are you threatening me? Just like that. Because I always was not afraid to stand up. Are you threatening me? And he, who was tough as nails, goes, I'm not threatening you, I'm promising you. Well, that made me even more angry, and we kept demanding public hearings, and Packwood quit. So in his memoir, he takes credit for Packwood quitting, which I found, we laughed about, I mean, really. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So you have to be brave, whether it's a small matter of a little taffy candy or some big thing. You got to be brave.
So on the House side, as a sequel to that experience, I had been sexually harassed when I was a staffer. And the Me Too movement explodes. And I thought, you know, I really want the women in the House to feel that they have someone that will have their back. So this one Friday before we were leaving, I did a little video basically saying, if you've got any issues, feel free to come to me. I was sexually harassed. And then we're going to a 50th wedding anniversary in the middle of Tennessee somewhere, and the issue explodes, and I'm nowhere to be found. And so then people started coming to me. And then I looked at the policy we had in the House, which is similar to the Senate. Now get this. If you filed a complaint against a member in the House, there was a 30-day cooling off period. You were not represented by counsel. There was a 30-day period in which there would be mediation. And if, in fact, there was a settlement, there was a non-disclosure agreement, and the taxpayers picked up the tab. So I said, there's something wrong here. So I introduced the Me Too Congress Act, which provided that the victims would be represented as well. The Senate actually didn't do that in the end. Victims would be represented by counsel, paid for by the House, that they would not be subject to mediation or cooling off periods. And if there was a settlement, it would be paid for by the perpetrator. And we provided that if they couldn't pay it within 180 days, that we would garnish their wages. If that wasn't sufficient, we would garnish their thrift savings plan. And if that wasn't sufficient, we would garnish their Social Security benefits. Wow. Okay, so the way that ended up happening is because a colleague on the Republican side from Alabama, couldn't be more conservative, was an employment lawyer, and recognized that this was a huge liability in the House of Representatives. So together we moved the legislation, it passed, and became the law. So we have made some improvement.
Let me tell you, that is not as easy as she makes it sound.
And so the freshman class, after we passed it, we went and presented the law to them. And you know what the first question was? Can we get insurance for that?
Oh, brother.
So anyway, so I want to talk now about...
That speaks volumes.
Doesn't it? Yeah. Your sense of humor, your ability to sing, your ability to write lyrics has a historic impact in the House of Representatives. And I want you to talk about the House gym when you were a member of the House that was only open to men.
I know. I hear the women going, what? What century
was
was
that?
that? It was the last century, actually. Well, it was when I came in was, oh God, I hate to admit it, 1983. And I had come from California, and the fitness craze had already begun. Craze, meaning you needed to like walk or run a couple of miles a day. So I get there, and one of the first things I asked after I got my office set up is, where's the gym? because I really want to make sure I could go there whenever I want. And they said, there's no gym for women. Well, they said, well, there is. They said, there's a small gym. I said, that's fine. I don't need anything large. So they escort me to the, quote, gym. I will describe it to you. It's the size of maybe this stage, maybe, okay? 5 hair dryers.
Old-fashioned.
The old-fashioned ones with the, you probably don't even know what they look like unless you go to the movies with this thing on. And I said, well, where are the machines? Oh, we don't have any. Well, that's not right. So I start asking the guys about, they said, we have a great gym, but women can't use it. Well, this is crazy. So I'm going to make the long story as short as possible, which is hard for a former senator. So we do go on and on. But the first thing I did is I went to Danny Rostenkowski, who was the head of the Ways and Means Committee, and I said, I heard you have some extra space next to the women's gym, and I'm wondering whether you would abandon that space and we can get some machines in there. He said, well, I don't remember, I don't know, but let's take a look. So we go, he opens the door, and that thing, you're not gonna believe this. There are bottles of shampoo, Helene Curtis products, which, do they still have Helene Curtis? I don't know if you even have it anymore. And I said, what is this? He says, well, Helene Curtis gives me all this to give out to the staff every Christmas, which is completely illegal now. You can't give gifts, but he had a closet full of thousands of dollars worth of these products. And I said, well, can you get rid of this stuff and give us, oh no, I could never do that. So then I realized we had to get the gym. Now we only had 23 women out of 435 people. And only about 10 of us could actually move because the others were so old, they took their husband's place when the husbands kicked the bucket. They were just there for a little time. So there were 10 of us, Olympia Snow, Geraldine Ferraro, just a great group, Barbara Mikulski. And so I said, you know, we just have to get into the gym. But we said, okay, we'll use the women's gym. And I had a staffer who was a really good kind of physical fitness person. She comes, now there's 5 of us in there. Olympia, Geraldine, Barbara, myself, Barbara Kennelly, a couple of others. You probably don't know the names, but they were just legendary women. It was fabulous. So we're all in some of them came in their gorgeous sweatsuits. I wasn't in a gorgeous sweatsuit. And Claudette says, okay, put your arms out. Well, we touched each other's fingers because there was no room in it. Then she says, hands on hips. And Mikulski says, if I had hips, I wouldn't be here. So then we all cracked up. We realized this was ridiculous. We couldn't do anything in that room. And I decide I'm going to get in the gym. So I go to everybody. Eddie Bolin, the head of the administration committee, no. And so we couldn't get in. In those years, women, we were not looking to pick a fight. We wanted to use our sense of humor. So we formed a singing group. And we asked the speaker, Tip O'Neill, if he would hear a presentation, a singing presentation. I can't believe I actually did this. And so Tip O'Neill, I have the photos of Tip and his wife, Millie, and they're sitting like, sitting here on the stage, we're entertaining, and we sing something like this. Please do not record this. I'll kill you if you do. So there's a song called 5'2", Eyes of Blue, which you don't know that either, but I knew it, so it went like this, if I remember the words. Exercise, glamorize, where to go will you advise? Can't everybody use your gym? There's more. Equal rights, we'll wear tights. Let's avoid those macho fights. Can't everybody use your gym? Now if you run into a colleague who looks sad and blue, She'll fight and fuss, she'll even cuss. You bet your life it could be us. Big finish. 'Cause we're not trim, we're not slim. Can't we make it hers and him? Can't everybody use your gym? We're only asking. Sing with me. Can't everybody use your gym? So we got into the gym. Tip said, of course you can get into the gym.
So it's a great example of sometimes you have to use humor and
Oh, yeah.
cajoling, but that was brilliant. And then eventually we have a woman's gym that actually is of sizable nature now without those bouffant hair dryers. Okay, let's go now to your first campaign.
Oh, God.
So your slogan reminded me of Gretchen Whitmer's slogan, and I don't know if you've heard this, but when she ran for governor, her slogan was "Fix the damn roads," and her slogan came from a constituent who was with a child who was in the hospital who was traumatized, and Gretchen says to her, "What can I do for you?" So she was expecting her to talk about something within healthcare. And the mother says, "Fix the damn roads." So that became her slogan. Now, you had one as well. Do you remember it?
Yeah, well, that was the first run for Congress. It was a Barbara Boxer gives a damn.
Ronald Reagan doesn't.
And that was the second part. Ronald Reagan doesn't. And I start shaking when I think, but how did I even win with that? That was so nasty in a way. But it was true. We were in the middle of a recession. And, I had a primary against a wonderful woman named Louise Rennie.
Who was the former city attorney
She
here in
was
San Francisco and a member of the Board of Supervisors.
Wonderful. And here's what was so fascinating. She had the endorsement of Dianne Feinstein. I had the endorsement of John Burton. And there was this big fight in the city because most of my district was Marin, but there was a big chunk of the city. So it was a really big fight. And who could even be mad at Louise Rennie? She's the nicest human being on the face of the earth. So I didn't know how I was going to run. I had a campaign manager kept saying, "You got to get mean." I said, "I'm not getting mean against Louise Rennie. There's no way." So finally, we had our first and only debate, and I summed it up after about an hour of going back and forth, because Louise, she's in her indomitable way, said at one point, when I get to Washington, and I'm imitating her exactly what she did, she said, "I'm gonna knock their socks off," like that. And that was not an expression I used because I was just more a girl from Brooklyn, you know. So she said she was gonna knock their socks off, and I said, "I give a damn." And so at the end, when I summed it up, I said, "I guess you could sum it up this way. Louise gives a darn, and I give a damn." And I won that race. That was really something. And it made all the difference because I got in there for 5 terms. And then I saw Newt Gingrich coming along, and I said, "Bye-bye, I'll leave that to Jackie."
But you also witnessed a lot of discrimination when you were running.
Oh, God, yeah.
What it was, tell them about the question you heard in the audience one day about the dish.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have to tell you 2 stories, but this goes to the first race I lost, the only race I ever lost. In 72, I knocked on a door, sound effects, and a woman says, "Who is it?" And I said, "Barbara Boxer, I'm running for supervisor, county supervisor." And she opens the door, and she said, "I know you." That wasn't good. And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm really happy. I'm asking for your vote." And she says, the first thing out of her mouth is, "I didn't think you'd be so short." Well, what was I supposed to say about that? You know, I said, "Yeah, but it didn't." I got around that. And then she says, "But the real reason I cannot vote for you is because you have 4 children and you're neglecting them." So I look up at her and I said, I'm not neglecting my children, and I only have 2 children. And she says, no, you don't. You have 4. I said, why are you saying this? She said, I read it. I read it in more than one place, in a letter to the editor in a store. I said, lady, I don't know if you've ever given birth, but I said, I did it twice, and I'll never forget it. And at that point, I realized I could catch a missile that was falling out of the sky and, save her, and she wouldn't vote for me. But that was one. The other one, that same time, I got invited to a meeting of the Sleepy Hollow community, blah, blah. And it was a lot of women and men, mostly women. They were looking at an oddity because at that point, Marin only had one woman supervisor since 1850. Her name was Vera Schultz, and she was fabulous. She brought the Frank Lloyd Wright building there, and then to reward her, she got voted out. So that was it that I got there. So I'm at this meeting, and I'm really getting into the issues. I could really get into them, especially the environment, which was the big issue then. And I'm talking about preservation. I'm also talking a little bit about the importance of after school, and everyone is with me, and they're with me, and I'm so happy, Jackie. I know I'm going to make it. And I said, any questions? And a woman her hand shot up back, and I said, yes. And she said, when do you do your dishes? I didn't know what to do. And other people go, yeah, when do you do your dishes? I don't have time to do my dishes, and now you're running for... And I just didn't know what to do, so I leaned back and I said, we use paper plates. Which, by the way, went against my whole environmental platform. It was a sense of humor with a consequence. But the reason I think Jackie is asking me these things is for all of you men and women here to understand how hard it has been, and maybe we're going to get to why this election is so important finally to break through. But she and I, we felt it. She felt it a little less than I did, but it's out there. It's still out there a little bit,
So just to add on to that, when I was running for Congress the first time in 1979 after Guyana, and I lost that race, I'm standing on a corner in a community in the district passing out brochures, and I passed this brochure to a woman who says, I'm not going to vote for you just because you're a woman. And it has always been indelled in my memory that it's not men that don't support women, it's other women that don't support women. And that's a task that we have got to undertake to be able to recognize that there's real value in supporting each other. I've always said that we'll have true equality in this country when we have as many mediocre women in Congress as we have mediocre men.
I hear you. I think we have made huge progress on the women front. For example, in my race for the Senate, I did not win the men's vote. I did win the women's vote overwhelmingly. However, you need to listen to this. I didn't win the white women's vote. Just think about it. It's, and I lost the white men's vote by a huge amount and won men of color vote. So it's really intriguing, and I think what we need in this particular election, I'm sure we're going to pivot eventually to that, let's just get over this stuff and recognize the truth that when every single person, can reach their height, whatever that may be and whatever they want it to be, we're so much better off because everyone is fulfilled. Don't go around telling people they have to have babies or they don't have to have babies and they shouldn't have IVF or what is going on? So I think in this election, we have to finally get past that point where, Jackie is right in that old days, women were, I had a next door neighbor when I was running for supervisor the year I lost. She was my neighbor. I loved her, she loved me. She wouldn't vote for me. She said, No, I don't think it's right for a woman to run for office, you know? That was way back then. So there's still a lot of prejudice, but I think we've come a long way. Last point I would make is when I was running the last time, or one of the times for Senate, I knew I needed to get the man's vote. And I know some men were threatened by a strong woman. So we had buttons that said, real men vote for Barbara Boxer. In other words, and so I suggested that confident men vote for Kamala. You could have confident with a K. Confident men vote for Kamala. I honestly think that's right, because those are the men who are confident, and the other ones, they got issues, you know?
You know, after Hillary Clinton lost, Madeleine Albright was in a small group, and we were discussing the election. And I said to her, Madeleine, how is it that half the college-educated women in this country voted for Donald Trump? And do you know her response was?
Tell me.
It was, well, she's also the person who was quoted as saying, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support women. And she got a lot of blowback during that election. But she says she thought that it was because women who were college educated looked at Hillary and thought, wow, she's accomplished so much with her life. And it made them feel somehow less than. And so they voted for Donald Trump.
Huh?
So we don't have that problem this time around. So we're going to get your questions.
I don't even understand that point.
Well, I mean, it's the same. It comes from that same view where women wouldn't support women, right?
No, I don't know.
But
I got a whole problem with that. I mean, because my view is, all you have to do is just look at the little kids and the way they react to Kamala, the way they reacted to Obama, the way they reacted to Hillary. And I think the one thing we have to keep coming back to, Hillary beat him by millions of votes.
3 million.
It's the Electoral College nightmare, which I had several bills to do away with Electoral College. They never went past from here to this table because the Republicans like it like this, you know. But we have to win this race in 6 states. So we got to go to the women and men in those states. The rest of us will be good.
Okay, one more question about your career, and then we'll move on to present day. As you look back at your career, in terms of all the fights that you've had, all the successes you've had, particularly as it relates to women, and you've done some pretty remarkable work in that regard. Tell us what you're most proud of.
Okay. Well, you know, when I sat down to write my book, I found out I had 1,000 ideas become law, 1,000, you know, starting from when I was in the House and I was protecting the oceans and the dolphin. You know your little tuna can that has a picture of a little dolphin? That's me. That was my bill, the Dolphin Protection Act, and we've saved 50,000 dolphins a year because of that simple thing. You can't purse seine on dolphin when you're fishing for the tuna. And at that time, it was almost impossible, but we got the tuna companies to come in and help us, some of them, because they felt we had a point. That was a small one. After-school programs for children, that was something I worked with a Republican senator, that 1 million children a year, every year, have the funds to go to after-school, and that was, you know, important. A lot of things I did for veterans that I remember that one of the darkest times I had in the Senate was the Iraq War years. I voted against the war in Iraq. I was so against it, and I cried almost every day because I used to say the names of the dead, and 25% of the dead were from our state, and my Republican friends said I was playing politics when I read the names of the dead. I had a tribute outside my office to all those who had died, and the Republicans made me take it into my office, crazy things like that. It was very dark, very difficult, and I found out during those years, Jackie, that when one of our military guys or gals wound up in the hospital, they had to pay for their own meals. In hospital. They were wounded and they had to pay. So I went to John McCain and I said, this isn't right. just a couple of other things. Water standards for drinking water, when I got to the House, believe it or not, they were set to protect 150-pound men or more. And that left out most of the women, people with AIDS, people with disabilities, little children. So we got that changed. There's a lot of good stuff.
How about
Yeah.
what you did with the Defense Authorization Act on breast cancer?
On which one? Breast cancer, yeah. This was so good. You know, Jackie will tell you some of your best ideas come from constituents. And I had a constituent come and say, we don't have enough research on breast cancer. And the place where there's the most money is the Department of Defense, because we were cutting everything else. And we were able to get an authorization into the Defense Department that made this a permanent part of their research dollars on breast cancer. Also burns, the same thing. These terrible, you've seen people with these terrible burns that they get in war, and they need so much help, and we were able to get that done. You know, the thing that Jackie and I feel most proud of is, you know, people will never know every little thing, a big thing we did. It's never, usually not in your name, it's an amendment that slides into something like last thing I'll say is I worked with McCain on was, right now, if a woman says I was raped and there's a trial, in the civilian court, they used to be able to ask her questions like, what were you wearing on the day that you claim you were raped? And how many people have you slept with? And these horrifying questions that have nothing to do with the case in point. But in the military courts, they were well behind the civilian court, and they kept doing that to women. And Jackie's an expert on sexual assault in the military. I worked with Gillibrand on that before I left. And we got rid of that too. So, you know, when I go to bed at night, I think about a lot of things. And I guess if any of you are thinking about going into politics, just remember this for your whole life. Don't say, what do I want to be? Say, what do I want to do? And I think if you go into it in that way, you'll do a lot of great things.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to questions. Katrina, you're the first, if you would like to ask your question. And then we'll take some just impromptu from the audience.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I know we touched on this a little bit in your conversation, but I wanted to ask how you both have handled unfair scrutiny that comes with being a female politician, and what are some of the public criticisms that you faced, and how did you address them?
Well, you have to sometimes address them with a sense of humor. You can't let it go, on the other hand. When I was in the state legislature, the biggest insurance lobbyist was always on my case, and I chaired the insurance committee. And then there was someone who was wired with the FBI, and he was being questioned. He says, well, that feisty little bitch. So we made little buttons that said, feisty little bitch. So you've got to, find a way to push back in a manner that, maybe is with a little sense of humor, but it makes the point. And there's going to be that kind of description. There's just, it's an inbred bias that I believe exists. And, competence and the ability to prove your worth has a lot to do with it. And, I think so many women law students in this audience, I mean, you have power. You have power of the law that you can use to benefit women. Senator and I had the power of legislating to try and help women, and so we spent a lot of our time on reproductive health and the kinds of equality creating environments that frankly didn't exist because, you know, it was men who were making the decisions, whether it was the house gym, for God's sakes, or, you know, whether or not women got the right to vote or the reproductive health. So,
Yeah, I think Jackie's right. You have to be strong. Bill Clinton once had a great line he taught me. He said, he didn't just teach me, he taught a lot of people this. He said, it's better to be strong and wrong than right and weak. So when you get criticized, I can hardly see you come. You know, it's important to be strong when you stand up to it. Don't be weak and meek about it. And I think the way to do that is with a sense of humor, but I would take it a step further. It's sort of reversing the discrimination you're feeling and sending it back. For example, when Dianne Feinstein and I, we were the first 2 women ever elected from any state in the union to be senators. We made history. And we'd face things like people would honestly say to us, things like, well, I'll vote for one of you, but I couldn't possibly vote for 2 of you. And we go, why? Well, first of all, you're 2 women from the Bay Area to represent the whole state. That's not right. And we said, that's happened for many years. You had 2 guys from Southern California, 2 guys from North. Oh, but we couldn't possibly vote for 2 Jewish women from the Bay Area. And I would always say to them, I'd throw it back at them, and I would say, I never heard you complain about 2 Protestant men. What is wrong with you? You know, what are you thinking? And when you turn it back at people, why are you worried about 2 Jewish women when you're never worried about 2 Catholic men or 2 Protestant men? And probably you wouldn't worry about 2 Jewish men either. I mean, it was really aimed at us. And Dianne would say always, and you remember this, Jackie, she'd always say, 2% may be fine for the fat content of milk, but it isn't good to just have 2% of women in the Senate. And, well, but yeah, that made a lot of sense. So we had our lines, and I just want to say in her memory, Dianne, I told you before we came from different factions. You know, I was usually more progressive, she was more centrist. She was very tall, I was very short. She came from an executive background as mayor, I was legislator. But when we found ourselves together in a moment in time where we could make history, I'm telling you, she was the favorite. People were thinking I can only vote for one. They were voting for her, not me, simply because she had run for governor before. She hadn't won it, but they knew her. They knew her from her amazing time as mayor. I was the underdog. And she took my hand, and she held that hand. And I will never forget that, because it goes to Jackie's point about women helping women. I would not have made it. It would have been very easy for her to just have her day of glory. And instead, she had me annoying her for many years in the Senate. I loved her.
I loved her as well. Okay, Elisa Martindale. And as Elisa's coming up, I'm going to tell one other funny story. Pat Schroeder was elected to the House of Representatives in 1972, I believe. She was the first woman who had young children in the House. And her,
Pat, yeah, I just didn't hear.
And so they're scampering around the floor. The New York Times is doing a profile on her for the New York Times Magazine, and the reporter says to her, how is it you can be a member of Congress and a mother at the same time? And she said, because I have a brain and a uterus, and I use them both.
That's great. She was great, Pat.
Yeah.
She was another one.
Elisa.
Hi, I'm a 1L here, and I'm interested in policy and advocacy. So my question goes to that. What can advocates in states with more protections for reproductive health care, like California, do to support women in states with more limited rights?
Oh, it's about the election. It's about the election. We have to win this election. We're going to lose our states' rights. They can just take away the pill, which takes care of half of the abortions. And even if we have great laws here, we'll be in big trouble. look, we've been having a wonderful time reminiscing, but we are here now. And Mark Twain has this great saying. He said, there are two most important days of your life, and I'm talking to every one of us. One, the day you're born. Two, the day you understand why. Now, that's philosophical and it's deep, and there are many reasons why. We know that, personal reason, but I'm telling you at this point in time, we're here now when every single freedom we have is on the line. Democracy itself, the planet itself, the ability to read what you want to read, love who you want to love, go to whatever entertaining shows you want to see. This is a moment. And if there's anything I would leave you with today, and we're not done yet, but I don't want to forget to say this. You have a responsibility because you're here now. You're in law school or you teach, and that's all great. But it doesn't mean much if there's a law that says if you're a father and you're taking your minor daughter over the state line because they're coming to California, and a trooper pulls you over and says, get out of the car. And you're a lawyer. What are you going to do? That's the law of that state. Allows them to follow a menstrual cycle. I kid you not. So I don't want to put any more on your shoulders than you have, because you have a lot on your shoulders. I'm married to a lawyer. My son's a lawyer. My dad was a lawyer. I went through 3 bar exams. I don't want any more in my life. I know what you have on your shoulders, but you got to save a little bit of that passion and energy to help us in this election. And you know what I'm saying? It doesn't hurt that much to set aside a couple hours every weekend to call into Arizona, to call into Nevada, or wherever else we know we have to do. So this, I'm not being partisan, honest to God. I am just saying, did we ever have a candidate who said he's going to be a dictator on day 1? And people go, oh, but he only said day 1, only day 1. Well, you know what you can do in day 1? Declare martial law. And that's the end of it. That's the end of America as we know it. So I'm not making it up. This is the one who says it. This is the one who says, I'm so proud the court overturned Roe. So I don't think the question is, what can we do to help? With all due respect to your question, of course we can help Planned Parenthood in all the states and help them service the people that need help. Absolutely. But there's something way more important. Last thing, there's an ad today by the Lincoln Project. Did you see it yet? Oh my God. That's why I just talked about a highway patrolman pulling you over. You must promise me you will Google that ad, Lincoln Project, highway stop, and you will see what they have in store for us. And if that's not enough, read the summary of Project 2025, where, by the way, and I promise I'll stop with this, the first thing they have is the end of no-fault divorce. You're lawyers. You know what happened before. If a woman was in a violent relationship, she had to prove, she had to show her bruises. She couldn't get immediate help. First thing on their list is end of no-fault divorce. Anyway, I'm sorry, your question triggered me. But that means it was a great question. Thank you.
Well, I think the right to travel is an excellent area in which you can be researching their ability to try and do that. Let's move on to Matt Wallace.
If you could give one piece of advice or suggestion for men or others now entering the law and starting their careers to support women throughout that, what would it be?
Don't be a bystander.
Yeah, just get right in there.
I mean, the power of men supporting women cannot be understated. It is a very important component. It looks like our time is up. Is that right,
Yes,
Dave?
yes.
Well, let me.
It's like a
and-
Trump rally. People start leaving.
Yeah, so we know that all of you have classes to get to. I also think there are many of us in this room who would happily stay here all afternoon and hear these stories and hear this advice. So please join me in thanking so much Senator Boxer, Congressman Speier.